Okay, good morning or evening, depending on where you are, and welcome to another Facebook Live. So I'm going to take a little bit time with this introduction, see if anyone is actually joining me today. It's a little bit up and down with the joining, and now I haven't done a live for a little bit over a week, so people might have forgot about me. But that's all right, I'll put this on YouTube when I'm done. So I'm going to talk about whether fasting can help with cravings. So my initial answer to that is yes, it absolutely can. However, it might not work for everyone. And the reason for that is just that there are so many reasons that we can have cravings. And if the cravings are coming from something else than a physiological reason, then it might not help. But I do want to add that fasting is probably good for pretty much everyone non-stop. Having said that, I want to add that pregnant ladies might not want to do extended fasting, possibly type 1 diabetics. I'm not saying that because I think type 1 diabetics should be eating all of the time, but I think type 1 diabetics can probably do some sort of fasting, intermittent fasting, whatever, but they might want to have medical supervision doing that. So a type 1 diabetic should, if they want to do fasting, really make sure that they have someone monitoring them because it can be quite dangerous otherwise. People with eating disorders should probably stay away from fasting. It's probably not a great idea because altering your behavior with food is something that they are really, really good at, that they will try to manipulate, and it's a trigger. It's like when I'm seeing Ben & Jerry's cookie dough ice cream, that is my trigger. So this can be a trigger to fall back into really bad habits with your eating. So if you're anorexic or have bulimia or you have severe binge eating or whatever it is, fasting could potentially trigger that. So for those people, I'm not sure I would recommend you to do this. There are better ways, other ways of doing it until you are truly recovered. Then if you still want to, you could possibly start experiencing with that. But I think you should probably try and manage your cravings another way. I think that's better. If you have a very low thyroid, might not be the best of ideas. It might work, but depending on what type of fasting. So let's have a little look at what types of fasting there are. So something that's really, really popular right now is intermittent fasting. You've probably heard about it. It seems like everyone is recommending it and everyone's doing it and everyone has their own way of doing it. And then you're not doing it if you're not doing it for a certain amount of time, and there are different rules everywhere. But let's just start with saying that everyone is practicing intermittent fasting. You do as well. So whenever you go a period of time without eating, you are doing an intermittent fast. So if you have your dinner at 6 p.m., then you have your breakfast at 9 a.m., you are intermittently fasting for 15 hours, okay? And that's a pretty good window. Many people have an eating window of 8 hours. So if you could go to 10 a.m., for example, you have done a 16 hours intermittent fast, and then you have 8 hours to have your meals. And that counts as intermittent fasting. So I would say that everyone is doing this. And there is no danger for anyone, no matter what condition, to do intermittent fasting to some degree. Now, some people do 24 hours, and that is still an intermittent fast. It still counts as intermittent fasting. Would someone who's diabetic, type 1, that is, fare well doing 24 hours? Maybe, maybe not. But they still need their insulin and they need to monitor this very, very closely. For example, people with very low thyroid, 24 hours is probably not a problem, but it could be. So again, it's really hard to know. Depends on how severe the condition is and so on. So you want to kind of monitor this a little bit. So with intermittent fasting, there are several different ways that people recommend. Most people will probably agree on that 16 hours is a good time limit to start with. So you start with not eating for 16 hours. And as I said, that could be from 6 p.m. in the evening until 10 a.m. the next morning. And that is quite easy. That is quite doable for most of us. There's no one that is going to feel like they are dying from hunger over those 16 hours. If you want to extend it further, you can do that. But if that feels hard and you want to try it, then just start with something shorter. You can start with 12 hours should be very easy because you can sleep away 8 of those. And then just work your way up to more hours of not eating. So you can start with just skipping breakfast and go straight to lunch. And then you can maybe push lunch forward a little bit and so on. You also have the people that are doing OMAD, that is OMAD, 1 meal a day. And I do that intermittently. Sometimes I'm grazing over a period of a few hours. So I might have like an appetizer, and then I have my dinner, and then if I'm still hungry, I might have something more. And this might take me 3 hours to consume all of this, for example. 24 hours is maybe slightly better in terms of some health benefits that you get from fasting than 16 hours. But depending on what you want to do, if it is from a cravings control perspective, 16 hours is fine as long as you are taking care of your diet during the 8 hours that you are allowed to eat. So you don't want to necessarily start binge eating during these 8 hours. You want to make a decision about what you're having. You want to control the food that you're eating, and you basically plan what you're having, just as we do normally if we want to be in control of what we're doing. So that's intermittent fasting. Then we have something called fat fasting or insulin fasting. I've heard some people call it that. That just means that you are eating fat, but nothing else. So you could potentially, I used to drink bulletproof coffee. So that's coffee with butter in and some MCT or coconut oil. And this counts as a fast because it doesn't, as a fat fast, because it does not increase your insulin. So this is still a good way of resetting your hormonal system, of calming down the insulin response and getting your leptin under control. That's still really good for that. As I said, I used to do this, but then I decided that I was going to stop drinking coffee because I never used to drink coffee. I just started because I wanted to try bulletproof coffee, and it was a good way for me to make my breakfast quickly and to stay full and not having to worry about that. But now I'm kind of over that part, so I wanted to quit it, so I just quit coffee. So instead, I decided to try water fasting, which is you only drink water. And what I can tell you is that water fasting is actually, strangely enough, easier for me than fat fasting. I thought the coffee with butter in helped me to stay full longer, and it was fine as long as I was drinking coffee, but I didn't want to drink too many coffees because that upsets my stomach. So I was always really hungry in the evening. But on a water fasting, you are really hungry in the beginning, but you very quickly get used to it, and then you get over it. But when I was fat fasting, every morning I had my coffee with butter in, and I felt okay. And then every evening, it was like I was starting this fast over again, and I got these hunger pains, and I had to go through that suffering every evening rather than just the first day. So from my point of view, I think, for me, water fasting works much better if I want to stay on it a longer period of time. But you can absolutely, as a way of starting getting into a real fast, which is not, an intermittent fast, something that is longer than 1 day, you can absolutely start with a fat fast. You can also start with a fat fast on day 1 and then move on to a water fast day 2. So that's all good. What did I want to say more about that? Yeah, so if we make a cutoff from 24 hours, if you go longer, we will call it a normal fast. Some people would drink non-caloric beverages during the fast, which is, coffee or tea or something like that. That is unsweetened. And that's fine, I suppose. I personally, if you can do that, I would personally prefer to just do a water fast. I think that's cleaner. You don't add anything else to your body that it has to metabolize, and you allow your body to just clean you out a bit. And the next step would be something called dry fasting. So this is when you're not eating anything and you're not drinking anything. So the theory behind a dry fast is that you're burning your fat for fuel, which will then release water that you can metabolize. And since you need the water for your metabolism, it will just rev up that system. So you will become a fat burner much, much quicker. You will burn much more fat than you do during a water fast because your body needs the water. So I'll just give you a quick introduction that there's a soft dry fast and there is a hard dry fast. So the soft one is when you don't eat or drink anything, but you can still brush your teeth, you can wash your hands, you can have a shower. The hard dry fast, you're not even allowed to come into contact with water because your skin can absorb it. So that's the difference. I haven't yet done any dry fasting, not for a longer period of time anyway. Sometimes I just don't drink, so I suppose I have during my normal water fast, because I might have gone 12 hours without drinking and not actually thought about it, and that's fine. So this is obviously something that you might want to try if you have gone through some water fasting. You know how you react and how you feel, but I would recommend that you have some sort of supervision doing this, because it could potentially be dangerous if it's done wrong. So having said all of that, so the conditions that I mentioned earlier, like pregnant mothers, I think they can still intermittently fast. We don't need to necessarily go 24 hours doing that. And the same thing with eating disorders. If you're always just, if there's no drama around it and you go for 12, 14, 16 hours not eating, and then you can eat normally after that, that's not a problem. But if you are obsessing about it and you're making it 24 hours and you're just going to do this and this all willpower and all your focus is into it, then maybe that is a little bit of a warning signal that, hey, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Low thyroid, same thing, 12, 14, 16 hours probably shouldn't be a problem. But again, just, have a little look at that. So let's have a look at a few different scenarios. What's happening when you are fasting is that you obviously don't add any energy to your system. You will burn all the glycogen that you have stored for energy to start with, and then you will have to go in and tap into your fat storage. So you will rev up that system. And for many of us that are eating high carbohydrate diets, like normal diets, we have carbs in our lives and we eat them pretty much every day. We have pasta and bread and potatoes and lots of starchy vegetables and that sort of thing. We are most likely carb burners. For people that are on a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet or something that doesn't actually have many carbs in them, probably are fat burners already. So the transition from being a fat burner into, or when you are a fat burner and want to fast, it's usually quite easy because your body already knows how to use the fat for fuel. So you just stop eating and it's no big drama. However, when you are a carb burner, when you're eating a lot of carbohydrates normally, and you start fasting, you're going to be very hungry, because your body is not used to it. It doesn't have all the enzymes already in place. It doesn't have the processes to start breaking down the fat at the rate that you need it. So this might take a few days. So that's why you usually say that fasting is really easy after day 3. For me, I'm a fat burner mostly, I think. So for me, it's the first day feels a bit, I'm not sure, but that always depend on what I ate the day before. If I had been strict low carb and I haven't had any, carbohydrates for a few days, and then I go into a fast, it's really, really easy for me. I'm feeling hungry, but I'm not feeling as if I'm dying. If I have had a cheat day and I had ice cream and let's say I just had pizza and I had everything, and then I go into fasting the day after, I'm going to be really, really, really hungry. Okay, so if you are a sugar burner and you start fasting, A, you're going to be very hungry, but B, your cravings might actually increase to start with. And that is just your body's way of saying, hey, I'm out of energy here, I'm really hungry, and I really need some sugar now because I am dying. I'm not getting the energy that I need. So you might go totally crazy with the cravings in the beginning if you're a sugar burner. God, I feel like I'm gonna sneeze. Okay, so if you are a sugar burner, most of those cravings would probably come from the physiological hormonal imbalance, and that's fine. If you continue fasting, this is when it's going to help. It's going to go down, it's going to go away. And if you can come out of the fast and just start eating good food and not too many carbohydrates, especially not the sugars and, on over the top amounts of carbohydrates, you're probably going to be maybe not totally getting rid of your cravings, but you're probably going to come out and feel so much less of those cravings. So it's really important, obviously, that you don't go back to the same diet that you had before that is causing those cravings. But if this is the problem that you have, that it's a physiological problem with insulin imbalance and insulin resistance and leptin resistance and so on, fasting will absolutely help with your cravings. Even intermittent fasting can help with your cravings to some degree if you are eating well during the periods where you're not fasting. If you're only doing intermittent fasting, it might be a little bit hard to stay on track during your eating window because you will still have the cravings. But if you can get through that, it should be a lot easier. So generally, people recommend that you fast for 3 days, and that is because it takes 3 days pretty much to empty your stores and get into the fat burning mode and start, you will start breaking down old immune cells and all those old, all those old cells that you don't need in your body. So you're regenerating your body and everything is fresh. And this goes for the hormonal system as well. So if you want to do an extended fast, I do recommend that you try to do for 3 days. But even a day or two might be really beneficial just out of a cravings perspective if that is the problem that you have. Having said that, if you are an emotional eater, a fast will not help. It might help for a little bit. It might obviously help you if you're fasting. You're obviously not eating anything that you shouldn't be eating because then you're not fasting anymore. So it will help in the sense that you are in control while you're doing the fast, and then you might be able to get rid of the physiological cravings, which you're most likely having on top of your emotional cravings. So they might be superimposed on each other. So if you can deal with that, you can do a fast, and it might help in the sense that it makes your cravings not feel as bad after having had the fast. Having said that, if I can start eating like you did before, or even trying to eat really strange. Anyway, if totally lost it there. So if you go back to, or even if you try to eat well, what is going to happen is that the physiological cravings might still not quite be back, but the emotional cravings are going to be there. They're still going to be there And it is just a matter of time before you go back into giving into those cravings, unless you're dealing with those cravings in another way. So you can have both. Most people that have emotional cravings, they also have the physiological ones because they are giving into them and they are eating all of these kind of foods. However, people that have physiological cravings do not necessarily need to have the emotional ones. So for those people, this can really solve their problem. And that's not the case if you have emotional cravings. It doesn't matter, even if maybe if you did a 30-day fast and you managed to sort of reprogram yourself, and you would have to deal with your cravings if you were doing a 30-day fast. So this might just, it might help because you are learning a new sort of behavior. You're training yourself to react in a different way. So this is a new neural pathway in your brain. But it's really easy still to go back into old habits when you start eating again. Okay, so I think fasting is a super helpful tool for those who are suffering from insulin resistance or overhunger due to hormonal problems. And I think it can be an absolutely amazing new start for those who have emotional eating problems, just as a way of breaking the habits. But it needs to be a conscious decision of how you're going to handle food when you go back to eating. So are you aware of your triggers? Do you know what's triggering you? What's causing this? What's causing the emotional eating to happen? Have you learned how to handle your emotions? And this is really important. If you don't know how to handle your emotions, you're not going to succeed, no matter how much fasting you do. And are there specific foods that always trigger your cravings? Maybe that might be a really good food on the list of foods that you can eat because they don't give you a physiological bad response. But maybe this type of food has some sort of emotional meaning to you, and it is connected to something else and trigger an eating behavior. So it's really important to be aware of those as well. So every time I have this, I get cravings and I'm likely to give in. And how do you want to handle it? What do you want to do when you've finished? Let's say you've been fasting, go back to eating. How do you want to handle your cravings? How do you want to handle your food? Do you have a plan for what to do in these situations? And these are all important questions to ask yourself, because if you don't have a plan, you're most likely going to fail. You're most likely going to go back to old habits. So as soon as you don't have time to think too much about it, you're going to go back and automatically do the things that you have been doing in the past. That's just how we are wired. So if you have a plan that you can always go to and follow, you don't need to go back to your old habits because you already have a plan in place. And then you can stick with it, and you can just use the fasting as a way of breaking your old habits and getting rid of the physiological cravings. So yes, I think absolutely fasting can help, but it needs to be approached in the right way. And in certain people, it might not be the best thing to do, not at the time, maybe in the future, but maybe not right now because you can't handle it for whatever reason. And there might be other medical conditions that I obviously haven't mentioned that you might be having, and you think, oh, can I do it? Is that really a good idea with this condition? Do your research. You can ask your doctor, although I don't really trust doctors most of the time because they like to be really overly cautious about such things. If they recommend it and you don't do well, they don't really like that, obviously, because it was on their recommendation. So if you need supervision, you can just go and ask your doctor. Ask if I am going to do this. I'm not asking you for your permission to do it, but I'm wondering if you could supervise me while I'm doing it or whatever. So there are ways of going about that, but do your own research on the condition that you have and what other people have experienced and how to go about this in the safest way if you want to try fasting.